everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Music, Money, and Life podcast. Today's podcast, as always, is brought to you by howtolicenseyourmusic.com. That's my website. If you go there, you'll find free articles, videos, and a ton of free resources all about how to license your music in television shows and films. Today I have a special guest. I have with me John Montagna, a Brooklyn-based bassist and musician, a fellow Berklee alum.
That's right.
John has agreed to be a guest on my little podcast today. John, I really appreciate you doing this. How are you?
It's my pleasure, Aaron. Good to speak to you.
Awesome. Likewise, good to speak to you as well.
Now, did we graduate the same year? Were you class of 94?
I was there. I didn't actually graduate from Berklee. I attended Berklee from 1993 until 95.
Okay.
Took about a year and a half off, lived in Boston for another close to 2 years, and then I went back to Chicago and graduated from Eastern Illinois University.
Okay.
So when were you there?
I was there 90 to 94.
Okay, so
I did the full 4 years, and graduated with the bachelor's in bass performance.
Yeah.
And it was a fascinating and enlightening experience, musically, socially. Stayed in Boston for a couple of months, a little bit less than a year after I graduated. I was in a band out there, and then kind of realized that New York was where I needed to come back to, and moved back February of 95, and I've been here since.
Nice. Now, did you find it in graduating from Berklee that made a big difference, as opposed to, like, when I was there, it seemed like there were a lot of people who would go for a couple semesters, a couple years. A lot of people like me who decided for whatever reason to stop and just pursue music. Did you find that there's been a big benefit by actually having the Berklee degree?
Well, right now there's the benefit of knowing that I'm a college graduate.
Yeah.
And at some point, I would like to go back and get a master's, maybe a PhD, and having a bachelor's degree is obviously a prerequisite for that.
Sure.
At the time, I knew that I wanted to graduate from college. I wanted to put in the 4 years, get the degree, and then go out into the world. I know what you mean about people who leave after a year or 2 years. And also, as I'm sure you're aware, a lot of people leave before the 4 years because they've got a gig. There's some sort of professional opportunity. A lot of jazzers, they're there a year or two, and then somebody sees them and says, "Hey, you're pretty good. Why don't you come join me on the road?" And then off they go. I liked that about Berklee in the sense that you could go in, polish up a few specific skills, get what you need, and then get out there. I didn't have those kind of opportunities waiting for me. I wasn't really fully formed yet as a player and as a musician, or as a person, for that matter. And I just knew, I don't think I knew that at the time, but I knew that I wanted to be a college graduate. I wanted to have that piece of paper and put in the 4 years and do it before I went out into the world. So in that sense, I feel like it has been a benefit to be a college graduate, and somewhere on down the line, the bachelor's degree will come in handy. And I'm glad that I went out into the world and graduated from college. And also, putting in the 4 years, I feel like I really galvanized as a player. Sure. You know, I bopped around from one major to the next while I was there, and then ultimately I wound up a performance major. And for the last year and a half I was at Berklee, really focusing on playing the bass guitar, having that instrument in my hands, and becoming the best rhythm section guy that I could possibly be, really cultivating those skills in a way that I don't think I would have if I'd stuck with the MP&E major, the music production and engineering, or as a composition major or whatever else. Once I got into the performance major, It was a really intense period of study as a bass guitarist, and I feel that had an impact on my playing, which, obviously has been to my advantage.
Sure. What year into
what I mean?
your? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was actually a songwriting major at Berklee, but like Berklee is one of those schools that you can't go there and not approve. As a musician, I played so much. I mean, even though, to be honest, in retrospect, I wish I had stayed and finished at Berklee. I mean, I pretty quickly figured out after dropping out of Berklee that it was probably not the best decision, because basically what happened was I had to work and pay bills, so I ended up working all the time. And anyways, I ended up going back to school mainly because you have so much time to devote to whatever it is you're learning. And Berklee is one of those places where you're obviously just surrounded by music, right? You live and breathe it.
Right.
I mean, I remember.
Yeah, it's exactly right. I think being in that environment was crucial, and it was crucial for me because music was really always the only thing that I was any good at, that I ever cared about. I went to Music and Art High School. I went to LaGuardia Music and Art High School in New York, and that was a turning point for me as well. I think if I had just gone to my zoned high school in Brooklyn and done music on the side, it wouldn't have been the same for me. But you seem to have done pretty well for yourself, Aaron. I mean, you got this songwriting licensing program. You know what I mean? So I wouldn't knock the whole dropping out of Berklee situation. And you can always go back if you feel so inclined.
No, exactly. And I did, I graduated from college, but it was just, at the time when I was at Berklee, I was 19, 20. Sure. I was young, and I just, like, in retrospect, I wasn't that intelligent about, I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to play music, and I just saw so many people. I would hear about people like John Mayer went to Berklee for like a semester, or Steve Vai and all these people, and I kind of thought,
you know what, Aaron, you and I could sit here and compare ourselves to our peers at Berklee, all night, and find ourselves coming up short. I was there with Abe Laboriel Jr. and Kenya Hathaway and Brian Beller, Melvin Butler. The list goes on and on of people who we saw in the cafeteria and in the dorms, who 5 years later they're all over the place doing this, that, and the other thing. Everyone goes to Berklee when they're young and doesn't know what they want to do yet. There's only a select few people who are that focused and that driven. After a year or two, can go out into the world. You and I have done quite well in our own way. There's about 10% of the population of the planet Earth that gets to do something that they love and something that they enjoy as their life's endeavor. So you and I are in that 10%. We're the winners. You know what I mean? You could sit there and compare yourself to whoever, to John Mayer or whatever. It's irrelevant. You've got a tremendous program going with the How to License Music thing.
Yeah,
that's how I feel about that. And it's taken me quite a while to get to that point where I can say, why didn't I hang with those people? I floundered quite a bit while I was at Berklee, but I was just trying to find my way, like all of us were. Again, everyone goes to Berklee. They're 18, 19 years old, trying to figure out who they are. I'm glad that I had the 4 years there, because it gave me enough time to find who I was and figure out what the best use of my abilities would be. The summer before my senior year, I joined a cover band in Boston that was doing the Irish pub circuit in Boston and out on the Cape. And that experience was life-changing, because up until then I'd really only performed on stage in the recital halls at Berklee, in the relative safety of the recital halls. And I was in an original band in Boston that did some clubs, but pounding the boards in Irish pubs in Boston night after night after night, summer of 1993. That's what really kind of, gave me that really steeled me as a player. And I don't think I would have been able to do that had I not put in 3 years at Berklee already.
Sure.
So it takes everyone as long as it takes them to find their path. You know what I mean, and find their strengths. And if you compare yourself to the superstars at Berklee, if you compare yourself to anyone else, you're going to come up short. So that's how I feel about that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I wasn't even comparing myself in the sense that I feel like I've fallen short compared to those people, just in the sense that it was always debatable to me whether or not you really need a degree in music in the first place, right? And so some of the most successful musicians I know haven't even gone to college. So that was sort of my point. But
you're absolutely right about that.
Berklee was a great experience, and I kind of wish I had stuck it out there. But hindsight is 20/20, as they say. But
I've gone back to Boston a couple of times, and the school has really evolved.
I've heard that
since then. I mean, there's a I'm seeing flyers up for the trip hop ensemble and stuff like that. I mean, it's from what I've gathered, it seems like a really cool place to go now.
I'm sure it is. I mean, it's always been a phenomenal school for music. I mean, where else can you go? And like my good teacher, John Finn, was like friends with Steve Morse, and Steve Morse came and did a clinic. And it's like, where else can? And Sting came one year and did a speech. Like, as a musician, I don't think there's a better institution that I know of on earth. And also
getting you on the path to career. I mean, it focuses you on getting your skill set in place so that you can build your career out of it.
Absolutely. If you're smart enough to really utilize the contacts that are there, because the whole faculty, they're all working musicians, right? Even my connection with licensing really happened as a result of going to Berklee and connecting with one of my songwriting teachers. But with all that said, let's do this. I usually introduce my guests a little more at the beginning of the program. So if you could, John, why don't you introduce yourself? I want listeners to know exactly who I'm talking to. So tell us a little bit about yourself. You're obviously a Berklee grad. You're
Berklee graduate. Yes.
And what else have you been up to?
Berklee graduate, class of 1994, bassist and singer, based in New York City native, and played thousands and thousands of gigs in New York. The big break, as it were, happened in 2003 when I began touring with the Alan Parsons Live Project, which is a touring incarnation of the Alan Parsons Project. It was essentially Mr. Parsons leading a touring group playing the songs of the Alan Parsons Project. And we toured, as Spinal Tap said, the world and elsewhere for many, many years doing that. And the rhythm section from the Parsons Band has done a lot of work backing up a lot of classic artists, a lot of package tours where there's like 5 artists on the bill and we're the house band for it. So I've had a chance through that situation to work with people like Todd Rundgren, Denny Lane from Wings, Joey Mollen from Badfinger. Most recently, we were the house band on the Happy Together tour, which was a 60s package situation with the Turtles. And we had Mark Lindsay, who's the singer from Paul Revere and the Raiders, Chuck Negron from Three Dog Night, Mickey Dolenz of the Monkees, Gary Lewis and the Playboys, Gary Puckett and the Union Gap. We've done some stuff with Mark Farner from Grand Funk Railroad. So that's the touring end of it.
That's awesome. And what size venues?
Everything from 200-seat rooms. I mean, we played the Ram's Head in Maryland with Parsons a few years ago. That's like a 175 seats, 200 seats, where like people are like right in front of you. To I think the biggest crowd that Parsons ever played was a festival in Portugal that was 20,000. We did, you do a state fair that could be 10,000, 15,000. So anywhere from something like that to a casino that's 600, 700 seats. A lot of theaters and performing arts centers that are 1,000 seats, 2,000 seats. Just about any size from the biggest to the smallest. Yeah. And there's obviously considerations that you need to take when you're in a state fair and people are a mile away. You perform differently than you would if you're right in their faces and you can see the whites of their eyes. I did a few dates with Todd Rundgren on his own, and that was a short but amazing experience where I got to play with. It was a 4-piece band with myself, Todd, his guitar player Jesse Gress, and Jerry Murata was the drummer on that. It was a short run in Florida and Alabama, but it was just an amazing experience. So as a bass player, I've done quite a bit of touring, mainly backing up what they call legacy acts, and then here at home, just working as a freelance bassist. Anywhere there's electricity and a need for live music, I'll be there.
That's awesome. So you're a true working class musician.
I'm a working stiff. That's exactly right. And as a songwriter and a performing artist, I've put out a few CDs of my own, which are all available on iTunes and CD Baby. I've done a few live shows on my own. The last couple of ventures as a solo act, I've been performing a solo bass guitar thing, where it's just me and my 4-string Spectre, just singing and playing the bass, and that seems to go over really well. And been a member of ASCAP since 1998. And I did a licensing deal, getting to your topic here. A couple of years ago, I put out a CD called Senza. It was a 5-song EP that came out in 2007, I think. And I was selling it on tour. Alan Parsons was gracious enough to let everyone in the band sell their solo CDs at the merch table. So I moved a few units of Senza on the road with Parsons. And then a few years later, I did a licensing deal for the 5 songs on Senza with a company here in New York. And this past summer, 2 of those songs were used on a Comedy Central show, a sketch comedy show called Key and Peele.
Okay, nice.
So I got my very first check from ASCAP about a month ago.
Yeah?
First piece of mail that I've ever received from ASCAP that didn't say, we regret to inform you that there have been no recording. The first time ASCAP ever sent me a piece of paper that said paid to the order of. And it wasn't a tremendous amount of money, but it was an amount of money which to me signified that I was in the game.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, that's cool. So, have you had other spots since then? Is this the beginning of more?
I'd like to say it was the beginning. It had not since then, but it was very encouraging to get the call. I mean, I signed this deal back in 2010, doing the first Happy Together tour. I took the tracks from Senza and I put together a 1-sheet. I got a favorable review in Bass Player magazine. The Senza disc is pretty bass heavy, and I got a really good review in Bass Player magazine. So I put together a 1-sheet that included some stuff about me, some quotes from the review, and I believe I had purchased your list of music supervisors and licensing companies, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I sent out a cold, unsolicited mail-in. I picked about 10 names and sent the Senza packages out to those 10 people, put the discs in the one sheet and my business card in some folders, sent out 10 of them with the intention that I would, send out a few more.
Mm-hmm.
My wife and I sat there stuffing envelopes one night and got a response back from this company in New York that said, this is great and this and that, and did the deal. And I thought that was pretty cool. A 10% response to a cold mailing.
That's awesome. But you also have like some pretty, I'm pretty humbled and impressed at the same time that you're just bass player out on the road with Todd Rundgren and Alan Parsons and all these acts, and you've got my little list that you're going through, sending out. Like, the music business is just so funny to me. But I would imagine that the fact that you are out there, I'm sure the fact that you're out there, you're a true working musician, you're playing some pretty significant shows. I would imagine that at least, at the very least, kind of gets people's attention, don't you think?
It gets people's attention, but it's not quite as automatic as you would think.
Yeah. When
I was younger, I just assumed, well, I'm going to be on tour. I'm going to be seeing all these people in the audience. I'm going to be meeting the booking agents and the promoters. So all I have to do is show up, and these people are going to go, right this way, and off I go into show business. You really need to be proactive.
Yeah.
About making these contacts work for you, and I don't think I need to tell you that. But people just assume I'm going to put up a website and put up a Facebook page, and the world is going to go, there he is, and come running. You really have to stay in people's faces, especially now, where everybody has got a website, everybody is making their own CDs, and it's great. There are so many more opportunities now than there used to be, but at the same time, the balance of that, it's the law of the universe. Every action has a reaction, right? The shadow side of that is that now, wouldn't you say the market is saturated with independent songwriters who have figured out that licensing, that's the way to go, right? So you really need to be very, like I said, proactive about making the connections work for you. For me, the education that I got just being around people like Todd and people like Alan, talking to them on the bus. Besides obviously the contacts that you make in the business are good. Selling CDs at the merch table. I would go out and sit at the merch table and shake hands and sign stuff. And, that would get some people on my mailing list. That would get some people following me on Twitter at John Mon, Jon, by the way.
Nice, sure.
Or what, whatever, picking up followers along the way. But for me, the touring experience provided something much more valuable, which was I got to sit and talk with people like Alan Parsons about
how did you get that gig, by the way, if you don't mind me interrupting you? I wanted to ask you earlier, problem. But just
the Alan Parsons gig happened through a guitarist named Godfrey Townsend, who's a fellow native New Yorker. I knew Godfrey from the club scene here in New York, doing bar gigs in Long Island, rock and roll cover band stuff, and Godfrey was, I'll give you the Reader's Digest version. Godfrey was the guitar player in the John Entwistle Band. Okay. Was the bassist from The Who.
Okay.
And, so Godfrey lived here in New York, and then he'd go off on the road with Entwistle. And he became sort of like a local celebrity here in town. And I got to know Godfrey really well doing just cover gigs here in the bars or whatever. So in 2001, a company called 21st Century Artists put together this tour called the Walk Down Abbey Road. And it was the idea was it would be an all-star Beatles tribute, where each artist would do like a couple of their songs, and then the group would get together and do a set of Beatles covers. And they got Alan Parsons, Todd Rundgren, Ann Wilson from Heart, David Pack from Ambrosia, and John Entwistle. And I forget if Entwistle said, "I'll do it, but only if I can have my guys be the house band," or if they were trying to put a house band together and Entwistle said, "Well, how about use my guys?" But in any event, Godfrey and Entwistle's drummer became sort of like the house band of this all-star Beatles tribute.
Okay.
And that's how Godfrey got to know Alan. And the following year they did Abbey Road again, only this time the bass player was not John Entwistle, it was Jack Bruce, because Entwistle was he was scheduled to do the Who tour, and then he unfortunately passed away. But in any case, they brought Godfrey back. Godfrey made, again, talking about making contacts, Godfrey got to know the people who produced this tour, and they brought Godfrey back the following year as the musical director. And so, when you've got, big rock star egos all in one place, you need a civilian to kind of wrangle all these people. And that was Godfrey, and he functioned really well in that respect. And Alan approached him at the end of that tour and said, "I'm putting another touring band together for myself, and I'd like you to be involved." And Godfrey said, "Yeah, well, I'll get some of my guys from New York, and we'll have at it." So he approached me one night in a club. He said, "How'd you like to be part of the Alan Parsons project?" And that was the start of the whole shebang. And it became myself, Godfrey, a drummer named Steve Murphy, and a keyboard player named Manny Focarazzo. And the four of us got together, learned up Alan's set. All four of us are capable lead singers, and so we tackled all the harmonies. Manny got all the keyboard sounds happening. I mean, the Alan Parsons project stuff is pretty lush, produced stuff. But the four of us were able to recreate those recordings, but also inject a lot of live energy to it. And we started with Alan, and then Alan got asked to participate in Walk Down Abbey Road again, and Alan said, "Well, why not use my band as the house band?" And so that year, Abbey Road was Alan, Todd Rundgren, Denny Lane, Joey Molland, and Christopher Cross. And the four of us had to learn up like Live and Let Die with Denny. I got to do Ride Like the Wind with Christopher Cross. Mm-hmm. I got to sing the Michael McDonald, Such a Long Way to Go. I got to sing that part with him. It was amazing. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So I'm sorry to go off on that whole tangent, but that's how that happened. But
really
to your point about learning, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that's really interesting. I wanted to know how that came about. What happened? Yep. What's up with the other guys in the Alan Parsons project? It sounds like just Alan Parsons was the only original member. Is that right? That's
correct. And without getting too much into the history of it, the Alan Parsons project was a studio creation. It was Alan and his partner Eric Wolfson, who was the chief songwriter, and it was much like Steely Dan. Is
was just a studio concept originally.
Becker, yeah, exactly. Becker and Fagan plus studio musicians, and so the albums, you can imagine it was the 70s. It's England, very high-minded, conceptual stuff. They use the term progressive rock to describe Alan's records. I don't know if it qualifies really as prog rock, but it gets lumped in with that scene. But there were different lead vocalists on every track. I mean, there was a core group of David Payton was the bassist, Stuart Elliott was the drummer, Ian Berenson was the guitar player. Those were the three main guys. I mean, if you're talking about quote unquote original members, but there was, if you look at the list of everyone that has passed through the Alan Parsons Project. I mean, it's like 27 people or something, like 30 people. So we used to catch a tiny bit of flack here and there from people. I went to see it. You see comments online. I went to see the Alan Parsons quote unquote live project, and there were no original members. Just a bunch of guys from New York or what, a bunch of American guys. And I would write to these people and be like, there's no such thing as an original member of the Alan Parsons Project. Alan hired us, and that's good enough for me. I mean,
it's awesome for you. I mean, and he wrote all those songs, right? Obviously, he has the right.
Eric Wolfson was the primary songwriter. All the songs are credited Parsons Wolfson, okay. And I think Alan would make contributions that qualified as songwriting, but the main contribution to the records was the production. Alan thought of himself the way a film director functions. He would sort of conceptualize everything and frame everything as the producer. And I learned a lot about production with being in that band and learning those arrangements, because there are specific parts that you need to play to make those songs happen. You deviate at all from the bass line to breakdown, let's say, and the whole thing falls apart. So I learned, and I talked to him about that, like how all of the parts, everyone's parts all fit each other. And that creates the sound of the music. He would have us do things, the few times that we rehearsed, he would seemingly not have any input whatsoever. But then he'd make one little comment. He'd say, like, 8 bars before the thing, but 8 bars before the chorus, play that line an octave lower. I'd go, okay. And I would do it, and it would completely change the direction of the entire picture. Little things like that. So going back to what I was saying before, the benefits business-wise, being around these people on a day-to-day basis, because sometimes you're out on the road for weeks and months at a time, and you're hanging out with these guys. You're not just on stage with them. You're hanging out on buses and airplanes and hotels, and you're having dinner with them, and you get a chance to observe these people and how they live and what they've been doing with themselves. I mean, I've had conversations with Alan about the business, about deals that he's done, and what was going through your mind when you were working on that, and you get to pick up real world wisdom that's just gained from experience in the business. You can read all the books you want about songwriting and song publishing, but when you sit and you talk to Mark Volman from the Turtles, and he tells you how a certain record deal went down, so then our manager called and said, well, how about this? And you talk to people who have been there, and these are guys that have sold millions of records and had Happy Together is like one of like the most played songs on the radio ever or something. Yeah. You know what I mean? You talk to these people and you get a sense of like what the reality is, because you see how these people live. I'll never forget getting an email from Howard Kalin, who's the singer from the Turtles, and they own their masters. They're one of the few artists that actually own their sound recordings. I got an email from Howard at the end of the tour one year, and hey Howard, great working with you. See you next year. And he writes back, yep, just got Happy Together in a soda commercial in Tokyo. I'll be sipping umbrella drinks till next year. So it's not just about how the deal gets done or what the deal. It's like, okay, now the deal is done. So now how do you live your life? Now that you've made your nut for the next 6 months, now what do you do with yourself?
Yeah.
How do you live your life now? If because most of us don't think that far in advance. Like we think about getting the deal, making the deal happen, getting that money. Okay, I made the deal. I got the money. And now what do I do with myself?
Now what?
What does my life look like now? And you can see watching these guys, just watching the way they talk to their wives on the phone. Yeah. And stuff like that. You see how these guys live their life. Like what does a life in show business look like from a human perspective? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that kind of leads me to something I wanted to ask you. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it kind of seems like you're spending part of the year doing these tours, and I imagine this changes from year to year. But what percentage of your time do you spend in New York, and how much time are you actually out on the road? And do you like being on the road? What is life on the road like when you go out on these tours?
I like doing the shows. I like hanging out with the boys, and I always spell it BOYZ. I like the gang. I like the fellowship of the band, the crew, the principals. It's like a submarine situation. You're on the bus, or as George Carlin would say, in the bus. Let evil Knievel ride on the bus. There's 4 of us in the band, 3 guys on the crew, maybe 1 or 2 of the principals will be on the bus with us. Tour manager, driver. I like the fellowship of that, and the friendship and the bonds that you form personally. Mm-hmm. I like going to a new venue and meeting the venue staff. I like meeting people who love this music and say, "You guys made our night. Thank you so much." I love all that stuff. Don't like being away from my family.
Yep. Yeah, that's something I hear over and over. I interviewed Todd Foreman a few months ago, who played saxophone for Sublime. He was in the very, very original lineup, and then did when they reformed. And he kind of said the same thing. He loved the experience of going out on tour and playing shows and playing for people just the life on the road after a while gets old.
Yeah.
Have you seen Have you seen that movie? I just saw part of this yesterday. I don't know the name of it, but it's I think it was on Showtime. It's a documentary with Flea from the Chili Peppers.
No. Guys
from Blink-182, The Offspring. They profile like 7 or 8 different bands, and it's kind of about like what it's like being a working musician, what the reality of actually going out on tour is. And it's fascinating documentary.
I'm curious to see that only because I think when a guy like Flea, who's from the Red Hot Chili Peppers, makes a documentary about what it's really like on the road, I'd like to see what Flea's experience on the road is compared to mine. I mean, and look, and I hate to sound, I'm just for the sake of entertainment. I mean, I harbor no ill will, but we fly home. We fly coach. Yeah. I'm waiting for a cab at LaGuardia to take me back to my apartment. I think his experience is maybe a little different than mine.
Most of the bands in this movie actually were not nearly as well known. Flea's probably a bad example.
Okay.
And I just don't remember, like, I think the Adolescents, most of them were like punk rock bands. I think they just sort of interspersed clips with Flea.
I take it back
then. To bring some celebrity status to the
film.
But most of these guys were like staying in O'Connell Lodge, taking cabs to gigs, eating shitty hotel food, and it just kind of made it seem very unglamorous and
right. What else? You know what else about that? To your point there, even on the fancy tours, the high end stuff, there is so much downtime.
Yeah.
There is really the show is 2 hours long, right?
Yep.
The other 22 hours of the day you're traveling, or you're sitting around. I mean, we've got Happy Together. We've got it down to a science. The 4 of us, I mean, 2 or 3 nights in, The band is tight. We've rehearsed all the parts. The crew knows exactly what we need. Monitor guy's got his settings down. So we arrive at the venue at 11. They load in. They set it up. There's lunch. And we do a sound check that's, 20 minutes long. We run 2 or 3 things that have everything in them, where like everyone's playing at full volume and everyone's singing, like the chorus to a song. And they're just sitting around for hours.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Are you able to go out and see stuff? Do you enjoy?
Sometimes, depending on the location of the venue. If you're in some performing arts center that's on a stretch of highway somewhere, and the nearest anything is 10 minutes away, then it gets to be, well, is there a runner that can take me there? Well, no. There's a runner, but he's out running someone else somewhere. He won't be back for 25 minutes. And then you go, well, okay, it's 6 o'clock. Showtime's at 8. If I wait for this dude to come back, and then the nearest thing is this far and that far, next thing you know, it's like, well, I'm barely going to make it back in time for the downbeat. Yeah. And so a lot of times you can't do anything but watch Star Trek on the bus. We watch AMC a lot. No, what's the Turner Classic Movies? A lot of black and white movies. I used the time to do my podcast, Radio 418. I did a lot of editing, a lot of sitting in the back lounge running GarageBand.
So you find ways to be productive.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah. I mean, all those stories about people, becoming completely unhinged and losing it on the road, just a lot of times has to do with just nothing else to do, or sometimes you're staying in a hotel someplace as a night off, and just because of geography, we're here on this night, but then like 2 nights from now we got to be there, so we have to all be stashed somewhere between then and now, and here's the nearest hotel. It's close to the airport, so we're going to stay here, and you have to be a team player and put up with a lot of silliness. I would say, this year's Happy Together tour, 99% of it was super easy and fine. Everything was cool. There were 1 or 2 travel situations that you were like, what have I gotten myself into? But again, the other 99% of that, where it's good and easy, makes up for that. And again, the mantra that I keep reminding myself was what Hyman Roth said in Godfather Part 2. This is the business we've chosen.
Yep.
So
enjoy take the good with the bad.
You enjoy, yeah, exactly. I made the decision to be a professional musician, and this is the job. Playing music is not the job. Traveling, and like you say, eating shitty food and making those accommodations, and getting along with people and being an asset to the situation as opposed to a liability. That's the job, And you watch these guys that have been doing it for 40 years, and you learn a lot just by observing them and how they live. Hopefully.
Sure. What percentage of the year do you spend on the road? Does it just vary?
The tours, the last couple of years, we've been doing these Happy Together tours, and those go out during the summer. Usually sometime in May. They start up sometime in May, and they finish up by Labor Day. And then there'll be some one-offs sprinkled throughout the year, where we'll leave on a Thursday, play someplace Friday, play someplace Saturday, fly home Sunday. They'll sell the show to different promoters for one-offs here and there. Sometimes without 1 or 2 people in the lineup, or there'll be a corporate event. They'll book it for a corporate event with 3 out of the 5 acts or 4 out of the 5 acts or whatever. So it's basically summer stuff.
Okay. So that works out pretty well. It sounds
It works out okay. This year, we were very fortunate. My aunt and uncle were staying with us for the summer. My uncle is English, and there was they had some sort of a visa situation that they were working out where they had to be in the United States. They live in England now, and there was some kind of a visa situation where they had to be in the United States for 2 months. And it worked out perfectly because they were like, do you think, is it imposing if we ask if we can stay with you? Imposing, it would work out perfectly. Come the 2 months that I'm going to be on the road,
Nice. Yeah.
And so my wife has an extra set of hands to help out with my daughter. And, that situation worked out really well. Otherwise, that becomes part of the job too. It's like, okay, I'm the stay-at-home parent. I'm gone for 2 months. Who's going to pick her up from school if my wife doesn't get off work until 5 and school lets out at 4:30, there's those 2 hours that need to be covered.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And sometimes it works out and sometimes it does not. I mean, I remember right after my daughter was born, there were a couple of situations where there were some travel situations with Parsons where 30% of the money I was making on these runs was going to be going to a nanny.
Yeah, just to take care of all the
and then right, and then I got to take out taxes.
Yeah.
Right, and then you start to wonder, well, what am I doing this for?
Right.
You know what I mean? And so those are the other realities that people don't think about, and that's when songwriting suddenly becomes a very attractive option.
Sure. So when you're not on tour, how are you making money? Mainly through gigs
as a freelance bassist in New York City.
Yeah.
And I can tell you there's plenty of ups and downs with that. There's a lot of scrambling, a lot of what we call stacking. I don't know if you ever saw a movie called The Kings of Comedy.
It sounds familiar.
Many years ago, it was Steve Harvey, Cedric the Entertainer, Bernie Mac, and I forget who the fourth guy was. And it was these four guys doing and it was it was a concert film
stuff.
Yeah, it was and so it was like a stand-up set from each of these guys interspersed with interviews with them talking about the realities of being a black man in comedy and this and that show. And Cedric tells a story of how he started out in comedy, and he says, I used to do a thing called stacking. I'd go Tuesday night, I'd go and do a set on this part of town, make $80. Wednesday night, I'd go do a set the other part of town, make $75. And another night, $50. Another night, $50. You do 4 nights in a row. And he says, by the end of the week, I had $400.
Okay. Just hustling,
doing lots and lots of little stuff.
Yeah.
So instead of, how come I'm not making $1,000 a night? Well, you can make, okay, so you're making $100 a night here, $200 a night there, $250 over there. You do something else that pays $75, and you add all that stuff up.
Yep. And
the trick is to juggle all of that stuff schedule-wise, time management, without burning yourself out, without spreading yourself too thin, and also making sure that all of these things that you do serve some kind of a purpose. Whether it's just what we call a treasure map gig, where I'm just going to go do the thing, collect the money, and get out of there. Or okay, maybe this gig only pays $75, but I get to sing half the night, and now I get to showcase myself. And that's going to be the thing that I invite people down to see. I mean, when Godfrey and Manny and Steve and I are home, we'll play bars in Long Island, the rock clubs in Long Island. Maybe those gigs only pay, $150, $200, $250 a man. But we pack the place, and we get to show off. We get to show ourselves and present ourselves, and we can invite people down. So maybe I'm working on an endorsement deal with a company that's based in New York, and I can invite the artist rep down to see me there. We'll do a set at BB King's. We do an Eric Clapton tribute show every year on Clapton's birthday, and that doesn't pay hugely, but you're playing at BB King's in New York, and that's a good, it keeps you on the radar.
Yeah.
So there's a certain amount of that. And then there are just, I'm going to go down the street, do this gig that pays $100 because it's $100. And hopefully you're not traveling too far to make that $100 because you think, I'm going to go do this gig that pays $100. Right. But then you're going to put $40 in the gas tank.
Right.
So it's gone. So does it pay to do that
and then
anymore?
Pay for the babysitter and then dinner,
exactly,
and then
exactly,
at the end of the night.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean and there's a lot of here's a gig that pays $150. Okay, well it starts at 5:00. All right, now I have to find someone to pick up my daughter from school. Are we gonna pay a babysitter? Babysitter's going to cost $100 by the time we both get home. Then what's the point of me doing this gig that pays $150?
And the gigs you're playing in New York, John, are they what kind of music are you playing primarily?
It's primarily it's all pop music. Like I don't do a lot of jazz gigs. I don't spread out and do a lot of Latin and jazz kind of stuff. It's all pop music.
Original music or
I must say I don't do. You mean my own original stuff or backing up like local acts?
Either.
I have not functioned as a sideman for any unsigned original acts pretty much since Francesca was born, my daughter.
Your daughter. Okay.
I just don't do those anymore.
And you don't do those because they just don't pay enough, I assume?
A little bit of soul searching after I became a dad, and I thought, what, if I'm going to fulfill someone's creative agenda, it's going to be mine.
Yeah. And
it was nothing personal against anybody. I just I had to cut back on something. You know what I mean? Sure. First couple of weeks of having the baby, I thought it was a real wake up call. Like I just cannot burn myself. It's one thing when you burn the candle at both ends in your 20s and 30s. You almost derive a little bit of excitement being, I'm so burnt out, man.
Right, almost like a badge of honor, right?
Exactly. It's like a Purple Heart. Like, look at the bags under my eyes, right? When you're someone's father, you need the full processing power of your brain at all times.
Sure.
And
how old is your daughter?
Well, now she's 5.5.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And especially once she gets old enough to kind of respond to your attitude and your behavior. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, just certain things I needed to cut back on certain things. And, so the gigs I'm doing in New York there's a lot of weddings and private parties and corporate events. There's stuff with the Godfrey Townsend Band. Pick up stuff here and there. Just anything and everything. I'm going to start branching out in the new year and doing more of my solo stuff, though. Now we just moved a couple of months ago. We're still in Brooklyn, but we're in Windsor Terrace now, and there are a lot more places, closer to where we live now that have live music. And I'm going to start doing more of that stuff in the new year. Just putting myself out there a little bit more. Now that Francesca's 5.
Hang on. Oh, sorry about that.
Oh, no problem.
I'll
okay?
edit this out. No, my singer's here. We're almost at an hour.
Oh, wow.
Let's
get to some songwriting stuff then.
I would love to keep talking. Here, let me open the door for her, and then we'll go a few more minutes here. Hang on one second.
Beautiful.
John, you still there?
I certainly am.
All right. So,
I'm sorry for rambling.
No. It's. I would much rather you ramble than not say anything. So
I know. Whenever I interview people for the podcast, and it's like, somebody who can talk, excellent.
No, it makes it much easier on me, and you have a lot to talk about. So no, I think it's awesome. But let's kind of wrap up. Okay. We talked about keeping this to about an hour, and we're 2 minutes shy of an hour.
All right.
One thing I wanted to touch on real quickly, though, before we go, is the Mark Maron podcast.
Yes.
How did that come about, and how did that work?
Okay, the Maron thing. I've been a fan of Mark Maron since he was on Air America, and when he started his podcast WTF with Mark Maron in 2008, late 2008. And it was this little thing. He had about maybe a dozen episodes up. It was right after Francesca was born, right after my daughter was born. I was home watching her during the day, and I would listen to his podcast. And one day, I'm listening. I'm walking Francesca to the playground. I got her in the stroller, and I'm listening to the podcast in one ear. And it was that day's episode. And he said, just putting some feelers out there. I need someone to write us a theme song. He'd been using an AC/DC song as the theme. Yeah. And he says, we're using music we probably shouldn't be using. So I want a theme song. And I was like, I said, I'm going to do that song. That's it. And I had at the time my Pro Tools set up in my workspace there. And so I literally got back from the playground. Francesca went down for her nap, and I said, I've got an hour to do this thing because she's going to wake up, and so let me crank something out as fast as I can. And a couple of weeks earlier, and I'm bringing this up because I think it will probably be relevant to what you do and what your podcast is about in terms of writing something made to order. A couple of weeks earlier, Maron had told the story about being on stage, being at a comedy club, and hearing a song come over the PA that just kicked him in the ass. And he ran out on stage and said, "Can anyone tell me what this song is called?" Like because it just kicked ass. He loved this. He just went on and on and on about how much he loved this song. And it was a song by a group called Delta Spirit called Trash Can. And I remembered that he had mentioned how much he just could not stop listening to this song. So I went back through the archives of all the episodes of the podcast, and he played a little bit of the song on the podcast. So I went and found that song and listened to it and picked up on the vibe of that song, because I said, whatever I send him, he's going to get people. This episode has been live, whatever, for 12 hours. People are going to start sending him stuff, and he's going to be wading through all of these MP3s in his inbox. I want him to hear my thing and go, yeah, right?
Yeah.
So how am I going to do that? So, well, the last time I heard him go, like, what is that song? Let me find that song and sort of cop the vibe of that, and that's what I did. I mean, there's really, if you listen to the two songs, with my theme song, "Are We Doing This?" the WTF theme, and "Trash Can" by Delta Spirit, they don't really sound alike, but there's a feeling there. I mean, the tempo and the groove are kind of similar. But using that song as the springboard, I came up with the WTF theme and staying in that vibe. So I threw it together. It's built on a bass guitar riff and some percussion stuff. I used one of Francesca's toys. Actually, she had this toy piano that when you press down on these figurines it's like a drum set with a smiley face on it, and it plays this little drum fill sound. I used that in there. I did a video on YouTube of me doing the theme song. Nice. Anyway, so long story short, put a track together, emailed him an MP3 to the address that he gave on the show, and and then kind of forgot about it because I sent it out, and then I thought, all right, you know what? He's probably going to get one of his friends from L.A. to do it. He'll probably get John Bryan. He'll probably run into John Bryan at Largo and out there, and he'll put something together. And I get an email from him. Hey, love this. You're the guy. How do you pronounce your name? I was like, what? And that was it. And he heard my thing, and chose that, and he liked the vibe of it, and that was it. And that became, overnight, I was like the WTF theme guy.
Nice. And have you noticed, did that bring like a lot of extra exposure? Did you notice a boost in
yes,
web traffic? Yeah.
The short answer is yes. Not as much as I thought. I mean, the day that it was that the podcast went live with the song, it was silly of me. I mean, I just assumed that like that day. I mean, and he mentioned my name and he mentioned my website, so I thought like that day I'm going to get flooded with, with new followers. But it took a little bit longer than that. He's been very gracious in terms of letting me exploit that connection. Okay. Like I said, I had the video camera going the whole time I was making the theme, and then I edited that together into a 3-minute piece that I put up on YouTube. And he's got that video on his website. Nice. And when you go on YouTube and you search WTF Mark Maron, my video comes up. So I've gotten quite a few followers on my YouTube channel, which is called youtube.com/John Montagna Music. So yeah, it has definitely gotten me some attention, because the people that follow him and follow that podcast, I mean, it's a pretty specific audience. Yeah.
Well, it's a pretty big audience, right? He's got a big following, I know. He
does have a big following, and he's also a real pioneer in podcasting. I think his podcast was one of the first podcasts to really show the industry that this medium was something to be reckoned with, and as far as comedy, and I think podcasting in general, I think his was the first. He brought a very unique combination of radio broadcasting experience and a lot of creativity, and also getting comedians, big famous names, to open up and have these really like real conversations. Yeah. So it's been cool to be attached to something like that's had such an impact. And then about a year later, or maybe 2 years later, his producer contacted me and said, listen, we're going on to iTunes. We need to get rid of all of the copywritten music that we've been using, because he was using like Chili Pepper songs and Bruce Springsteen and the Stones and, as bumpers. Mm-hmm. And he said, we've got to get rid of all this copywritten music. We need about a dozen bumpers. Would you be interested in doing some more music for us? I was like, are you kidding? Absolutely. So we worked out a deal. It was a buyout, and I basically gave them a library of about a dozen bumpers. It was about a half of them were new things, little musical sketches that I had on GarageBand that I would polish up, because it's going to play for 10 seconds and then fade out. I had a couple of riffs that I'd been toying with that hadn't been built into anything yet, and so I polished those up. And then I did about a half a dozen sort of remixes of the theme song. Okay. Change the drum part around or whatever. Put some more effects on it, that kind of thing. Solo everything except the bass and the drums. And that they said they needed about 12, and I cranked those out. And that was done just under the wire. I was like, yeah, no problem. When do you need these? 2 weeks. It's like, okay. And I remember it was Thanksgiving. My father-in-law was staying with us. And at the time, we were living in a 1-bedroom apartment. And he was out asleep on the couch. And I remember being in the kitchen with my laptop and an M-Box cranking these mixes out. But that has been very cool. That, like, besides the theme song, bumpers that come on. I mean, he's got some other bumpers on there as well. But about half the time he's using stuff that I did. And like I said, it was a buyout, and he also allowed me to release that as a CD. I put out a thing called the WTF album. It's basically somebody described it online as, like, it's John Montana saying, "Please let me score your film," or something. It's like my scoring reel. But yeah, so that was how that came about. And I've met him a couple of times. I've been I've been to a few of his stand-up shows, a couple of the live WTFs that he did. In fact, the first live WTF that he did in New York, I actually played the theme song live.
Oh, nice.
At the beginning and the end of the show. And yeah, so he's been very cool to me, very gracious about letting me exploit that connection.
That's really cool. I've actually never heard his podcast, but I listen to the Joe Rogan podcast pretty frequently.
All right.
And he's been on that show a couple times. So I saw on your site that you did the music. I'm like, I just listened to an interview with Mark Maron the other day.
Yeah.
So
you should definitely check out WTF, because it's always consistently entertaining. I mean, you know it as well as I do. There's a lot of podcasts out there made by people who don't understand that, like, 10 seconds where nothing is happening is just an eternity.
Yeah.
And
bores people to death.
Exactly. I mean, and that it's the advantage and disadvantage of this medium is that anyone can do it. But Maron had, he was on Air America for a long time, and he knows how to get on a mic and talk.
I'm sure I still have a long ways to go, but well, hey, listen. Speaking of podcasts, tell people about your podcast, and then I need to wrap up because I have my singer sitting here looking at me on Patreon.
My podcast is called Radio 418, and it's essentially very similar to your thing. I mean, it's shop talk from the perspective of a working musician. Sometimes it's me doing a monologue about a topic that I'm particularly interested in or passionate about. A lot of my episodes are about physical media. I did one where I talk about the advantages and disadvantages of Spotify, all that kind of thing. And there are also a certain amount of interviews that I do. I had all of the principals from the Happy Together tour this summer. Mark Volman and Howard Kalin from the Turtles, Chuck Negron from Three Dog Night, Mark Lindsay, Gary Puckett, Gary Lewis. We did a Happy Together show in Branson, Missouri a couple of weekends ago, and Barry Williams was there, Greg Brady from the Brady Bunch.
Oh, yeah.
And I got to talk to him for a little while. Got to talk to Mickey Dolenz for about 10 minutes. So that'll be up at some point. But you can hear the podcast at 418.podomatic.com. Nice. The words 418, or you can just look up Radio 418 Radio 418 on iTunes.
Radio 418, and that you also have it streaming from your website as well, right?
Yeah. There's a Podomatic player embedded on my website, which is johnmontagna.com, right on the homepage.
Cool.
So you can stream it from there as well.
Well, John, listen, thank you so much. I really appreciate you.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Taking the opportunity to do this. I wish we could go. I feel like we could keep talking, but I have band practice here and then a gig.
Oh, listen, you got to do what you got to do. I hope I didn't ramble too much. I hope you got some interesting insights there. And and by the way, I want to thank you for the your program has really helped me a lot. I got like I told you, I had a licensing situation from that mailing list that I ordered.
Yeah, that's awesome. I always love to hear that kind of feedback.
And I think it's great that you've succeeded in that field, and you're sharing your knowledge with people, and you're helping people. You're sort of demystifying the process for people, and it's a tremendous help. And I wish you the best of luck for the future with more continued success with that.
Thank you so much, and let's keep in touch. I'd
you got
like
it, buddy.
to stay abreast of what you're up to as well.
You're based where, in Chicago?
I'm based in Chicago. I'm actually in the Dominican Republic right now. I'm doing a music festival next week, so doing some shows down here.
All right. Well, when I come through Chicago, if and when we come through Chicago on the tour, I'll hit you up and we'll.
Please do. Let me know. That'd be awesome.
Grab a drink or 5.
I'd love to.
You got it.
So JohnMontagna.com.
Montagna.
And, John, what I'd like to do, if you're cool with this, is I'd like to end each podcast with a song. Can you send me, like, the song of your choice? It can be the Mark Maron theme song. It can be whatever you want to send me. I'll play it at the end.
I'll send you that and maybe one of mine, and you can decide.
Okay, perfect.
How's that sound?
That sounds perfect.
All
John,
right.
Thanks so much for doing this. Have a great day.
You got it, buddy.
Take care.
You got it, Aaron. Take care. All right, bye-bye.
So after John and I recorded the podcast that you just listened to, John decided to send me a song called You Are Safe from a CD of his called Senza. And this is a beautiful song, and we're going to listen to it right now.